Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar entitled Putting the A in STEAM, Adding the Arts, Ideas for Any Teacher. We're happy you're here. My name is Suzanne Wesley and I am a Curriculum and Instruction Specialist for Learner's Edge. And each day we talk with teachers that are seeking strategies that they can immediately apply to their classroom. And we hope that today's webinar will provide you with those strategies that you can use. Before we start, we'd like you to please look at the screenshot of what you should. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to join us today. And with that, I would like to introduce Barb Istis, who put our presentation together. Along with Barb are our panelists, Dawn Butler and Molly Keeble. Barb will speak first and she'll lay the groundwork and the foundation for how you can infuse arts into your curriculum. And after that, our panelists, Dawn and Molly, will join us in a conversation. Together, they have over 50 years of classroom experience. And with that, here's Barb Istis. Thank you, Barb.
Thanks, Susie. It's a real pleasure to be here and share some really fun information and background about the arts and integration for classroom teachers today. We often at Learner's Edge get requests to add more arts courses into our course options. And recently, we did create a new course on STEAM and arts integration. That will launch on December 19th, and we're pleased to let you know about that. It's exciting to read how brain research is confirming the importance of the arts in learning. Once teachers gain awareness of the significant role that arts and creativity play in all our lives, they can start integrating the arts in small but powerful steps. So let's start here with this question. Why do the arts matter? We believe every teacher should have an answer to this question. Do you? Let's hear some of your ideas as you complete this sentence. The arts matter because we'd like you to type your initial responses into the question panel on the right-hand side of the screen so we can share out a few first thoughts that you have. It's important to know where you align with the arts today because that will be your starting point.
So we'll give you a few minutes to just look at this question and ponder and let us know your thoughts on why the arts matter, and then I will announce what we see. So go ahead and share your knowledge on that.
And while you guys are weighing in and we're here collecting ideas, I thought we'd share a visual summary of some of the proven outcomes and advantages for arts integration. We've included the link to this image in the webinar resources for you to save as inspiration for yourself for what can come from your efforts and actions to integrate the arts.
So I can share some of the things that people have sent to us while we've been waiting here. Teachers are saying that the arts help them get excited about teaching. Here's another one. It says students learn it's okay to make mistakes. The arts build confidence. The arts honor different learning styles. They motivate. They help our students express themselves and communicate in a different way. And the arts help engage students of all ages and abilities.
That's great.
Thank you, teachers.
Yeah, thank you for sharing those ideas. And like I said, I think just to put some thought into it, where do I stand today and what do I think about that is really a good place to begin. So let's move to a video that we found created by Americans for the Arts. It's packed with facts and figures that back up our belief that the arts really do make a difference in teaching and learning. This young woman, Natalie, shares the science and stats on the impact of arts, and she encourages everyone in our schools and communities to start stepping up for the arts. Teachers, this message is for you.
What makes the world beautiful? Is it a painting? Is it music? Is it dance? What's the world look like without these things? The arts make the world beautiful, but what are the arts exactly? The arts are a series of disciplines which cultivate our ability to imagine, create, and innovate. Those sound like science words, and science shows students who have greater access to the arts improve their chances to succeed in life. 72% of business leaders say that creativity is the #1 skill they hire for. And educators agree that arts teach creativity. What do you think? I agree. Like creative writing, which has the word creative right in the name and gives kids essential critical thinking skills. Or music, which is basically math and science made beautiful. Studio arts courses like painting, ceramics, and photography teach math and science concepts in a practical way. Say cheese! And dramatic arts also help young people expand their confidence and self-expression. Hear me now! Only 3% of grade schools offer dance. Who doesn't love to dance? Let's check the facts. Students who are involved in the arts are 4 times more likely to participate in a math and science fair. That's good for math and science. Those same students are more likely to be recognized for academic achievement. Are you seeing a pattern here? Learning creative skills keeps kids in school and makes them more desirable in the job market as graduates. Plus, they're 17% more likely to volunteer and 20% more likely to vote as young adults. That sounds like winning at life. And check this out. Students of low socioeconomic status have an average dropout rate of 22%. But students from the same neighborhoods who got a chance to take art classes had an average dropout rate of 4%. And did you know that students who take 4 years of classes in any of the arts disciplines average almost 100 points better on their SAT scores than students who don't? If this were a basketball game, 100 points would be a big deal. But every year we hear about more and more arts programs being cut in our schools and our communities. Are you wondering how to support the winning team of the future? Here's what you do. Tell everyone. No, seriously, share this video with people. I didn't make it just to listen to myself talk. Ask around. School teachers, parents, students, principals, administrators. Ask them what's happening with arts programs in your community. Ask them if they need anything. You'd be surprised how easy it is just by starting a conversation. So if you're a principal, a school board member, or somebody just plain important, do something. It's not just for the kids. It's for the future. It's for all of us. The arts make the world beautiful, and our students smart and successful. Encourage creativity. Teach the arts.
What a wonderful video. We love Natalie. We love everything that she has to say there. There's a lot of statistics. Some that I just caught from watching the video were that companies, 72% of business leaders say that creativity is something that they hire for. That's the number one thing that they hire for. Yet we're seeing that the arts aren't being as infused into curriculum as they should be. Those statistics about only 7% of high schools require studio art, and only 3% of grade schools offer dance. So those statistics can be somewhat alarming.
Yeah, it's really, I really selected that because I felt like it really presented some pretty high-end data for us to look at and to really have us think about what are we going to focus on and how will we engage students with creativity. So yeah, every time I watch this video, I'm inspired to promote the arts in our schools. Individual classroom teachers can take this message to heart and start infusing the arts right there in your own classroom. So here's one standard definition of arts integration for you to consider as we begin. Arts integration is an approach to teaching in which students construct and demonstrate understanding through an art form. Students engage in a creative process which connects an art form and another subject area and meets evolving objectives in both. We are here today to engage in a conversation about the arts. What are they? Where do the arts fit in our classrooms and curriculums? Who should connect with the arts? When should we integrate the arts in our instruction? And perhaps most importantly, why? Why should we consider the arts when instructional time is such a precious commodity? Here's someone who has a lot to say about teaching and instructional priorities. David Souza is an international consultant, renowned educator, and brain science expert. He shares his simple yet powerful belief in educational neuroscience and teachers as what he calls brain changers. Souza speaks about the new science called education neuroscience and claims that we need to pay attention to it because it is helping us become more successful teachers. He says in order to engage students at higher levels, we should integrate the arts into STEM and also regular curriculum. And in order to do this effectively then, we need to first understand the new paradigms of teaching and learning. We've included a video link of David Souza in the webinar resources. This education guru has so much to say about brain science, and he is true inspiration. If you can, take a little time later to watch this 4-minute video clip. Check it out and see for yourself. He makes this very complex scientific research seem really simple for teachers as brain changers to plug right into your practice. The arts include an array of beautiful and interesting forms. Here's a list we believe covers those which could be considered for arts integration in your classroom. But first, let's think about this question. That's the time for our first poll question. Which art form do you see most often in your school? In other words, which of these arts is most visible to you?
So thank you, Barb. Now, audience members would like you to vote and let us know which of the art forms you see most often in your school. So you can see the selections there: music and dance, film performance arts, art, digital art and applied art, crafts, and creative writing. We will wait for you to respond, and then we will let you know what we see on our poll. Interesting. Art, digital art, and applied art is leading the pack with 40%. After that, we see crafts as 24%. Music and dance, that surprises me. Music and dance, I mean music, I guess, but not dance so much. Yeah. And then creative writing, 16%. We had kind of postulated a little bit into our discussion the other day that creative writing would probably be the most popular. So this is interesting.
Yeah. But the digital arts, you would just factor that into all the technology that we're infusing and of course, trying to really engage kids in really creative ways. So that's great to know, and was arts integration, so good.
Thank you for your participation.
Yeah. The point is that the arts stand out in our schools. We can see, hear, and feel arts energy. But let's consider why that is. Why do you think these particular art forms are visible? Well, we would propose that arts engagement is teacher-driven. Teachers, either individually, as a team, or school-wide, will adopt an instructional philosophy that arts bring learning to life, and they too share passion and enthusiasm for these arts themselves. Motivation to experience and share the arts along with their students is a driving force for arts integration. Teachers witness that the fusion of arts with core content is important because instead of seeing learning as knowledge presented on a page or something recited for a test, students realize far greater benefits when art reflects life and makes knowledge, stories, and facts come alive. Transforming learning into creating art not only engages students, it allows the content to live through them and provides a purpose to communicating knowledge to the world. If arts integration begins with the teacher, awareness, intention, and implementation are the steps we must take. Education is driven by research on student achievement, and we know that teacher quality is a key factor in successful learning outcomes. So we can't ignore the data that supports teacher satisfaction and engagement when it comes to arts integration. It is universally agreed that teachers must strive to help all students develop 21st century skills, and there are so many critical skills developed from engagement with the arts. It is clear that these skills are intertwined. The arts engage creativity and collaboration for both students and teachers. Arts integration collaborations between teaching colleagues who share students or with outside art agencies or artist residencies provide win-win instructional planning and implementation. Imagine how some solid collaboration could spark creative energy and outcomes. If you already know creativity and education expert Ken Robinson, You've likely watched his famous TED Talk on creativity in schools. If you haven't heard of him, it's absolutely time you meet him. Ken Robinson challenges the way we're educating our children. He champions a radical rethink of our school systems to cultivate creativity and acknowledge multiple types of intelligence. We've included a link to his important talk about the critical importance of creativity. He's got a great sense of humor, along with a very, very serious message. He believes children are natural learners. If you can light the spark of curiosity in a child, they will very often learn without any further assistance. And that's intrinsic motivation to learn. Isn't that what we dream of for all of our students? This definition of creativity is worth a review. It helps us see creativity as a true connector for the sciences and the arts. The research for arts integration and teaching creativity is undeniable. We've considered where the arts are most visible in our classrooms and schools. Now we want to push beyond the visible and think about a subject or content you teach that could really use some new energy and engagement. So let's get this conversation started. We've collected some arts integration inspiration, either from our own teaching experiences, our children's classrooms, or from workshops and professional development. We've come together today to share those ideas, just teacher to teacher, and we invite you to listen in and see if something will spark your interest.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Barb. We have our panelists here, Molly and Dawn, and Barb will add her information as well. And we're going to talk a little bit about how they've infused arts and some of their life experiences, teachers, as classroom teachers, and as parents, too. What we'd like to start with today are the crafts and decorative arts. And Molly is going to share an experience that she had with her daughter Lily using glass mosaic to learn and do a history project. Yeah, thanks, Susie. The first strategy I'm going to share with you today, I actually learned as a parent, not as a teacher, but I thought it was really cool and I thought it would be a nice way to start out today. So my daughter is in 6th grade, her name's Lily, and she is in history class this year, and it's Minnesota history. So rather than start with the textbook, her teacher asked all of the students in the class to write their own Minnesota story. So he just said, take a look around you. How do you connect with the land around you or the city or the place in which you live? What makes you sort of uniquely Minnesotan? And my daughter loves the outdoors and loves being on the water. Obviously, we are the land of 10,000 lakes. So she wrote a story about a time when she went tubing for one of the first times. If you're not familiar with this, it's very much like water skiing. You're at the back of a boat, but instead of on water skis, you're in an inner tube, basically. Her friend's dad went a little too fast, and she and her friend Adeline were thrown from the tube, and this was very dramatic and traumatic, of course, for a 4th grader, and she always remembered that story. So she wrote this great creative writing piece, and all of her friends in her class wrote creative writing pieces as well. So again, kind of a combination of both creative writing and also the creation of an art project as well. And he said, all right, now you're done with your story. I'd like you to create an artwork that represents how you felt or the experience itself. And he really pushed them to work beyond the page. So he said, of course, you can draw a picture if you'd like, but can you think of another way to represent that? And even just that little tiny spark of saying, can you push yourself beyond the drawing? It was really interesting to see how kids reacted. For my daughter, it was a little bit stressful. You know, how am I going to impress my teacher? What am I going to do here? And she went back to a project that we had done earlier through a different art program where she learned how to do mosaics. This is very low budget mosaic. It's done with broken glass. So you can't, this would be an adult supervised project, not for little kids, and again, at home. So probably not something you would do in your classroom, but it turned out very cool. And she did the little tube there that you can see with the 2 girls on it. She created just out of clay. So I just thought it was a nice way to think about, you know, when we ask our students to create art, what does that do for them in their own minds? How does that expand, you know, their idea of success or achievement, and also individuality? And she loved bringing it to the school, and they had a little gallery walk with all of those things. So just a nice way, an easy way to get some writing into the curriculum, and then also artwork into the curriculum without a lot of materials required on the part of the teacher. So It's really true to life. I mean, that is what it looks like to watch little kids on the back behind a boat on an inner tube. I mean, you typically lie on your stomach hanging on, and that's actually Lily and Adeline.
Yeah, and the wave, and she talked about how huge the wave felt, of course. You know, I mean, the wave was no way that large. But that's her imagination at play. So she had an opportunity to talk about that. So yeah, I thought it really just expanded the lesson for her in a really nice way, and got her excited about learning more about her state too. So
wonderful. Thank you, Molly. And now we're going to talk a bit about music, including vocal and instrumental music. Dawn is going to talk us about how she has used GarageBand and podcasts. Thanks, Dawn.
Thank you, Susie. One of the things that I found, I was a high school English teacher, and one of the things I found regularly was that music was a surefire way to engage students, especially their music, and giving them opportunities to take a look at music as an art form was almost a guarantee to hook them. So I did a couple of things with music in my classroom. One of them was a transition, and during our transition times, anytime we were in between classes and during that kind of changing classes time, I would always have music playing, and oftentimes the students would come in and bring in the music of their choice. So that was kind of a fun little way. They always kind of came in, and it was kind of a time for them to chill out and be able to get their minds ready for the next class. And it oftentimes was music that they really liked. So that was kind of a fun way to kind of integrate the arts without really having to do a whole lot on my end. But also another way to have them celebrate and really tap into some lyrics and music that they love was a project that we did called the Daily Almanac, which is modeled after the Writer's Almanac by Garrison Keillor on National Public Radio. The students each selected a day from a calendar, and then they were responsible for creating a podcast on GarageBand for that day. And it needed to include their name, a song of their choice, and a reason for choosing it, and an event that happened on that day in history. So I gave them a general script, but they took turns going into a quiet area and recording and then editing their podcast. And because of this, we had a way to open each of our class periods. So they would come in, settle down a little bit, and then we would play the Daily Almanac, which they had created for every day of the year. So they had a chance to listen to each other's. They really enjoyed that. Sometimes students would be humorous in their podcast, or they would do kind of a fun song that they would all appreciate. Total authentic audience if you're going for that. There's a couple different tools that you can use with GarageBand, which is available through Apple products, but then Audacity is another one that you can take a look at. You can do podcasts with really any subject matter, having students illustrate any concepts in an audio form, but it's really a wonderful way to really get kids connected with some music that they love already in a different way. I would suggest doing a podcast with any age group, really, but it just depends on the level of supervision that you can provide with the technical aspect of things. These folks, since they were in high school, they just kind of were able to go off by themselves and have minimal help figuring out the program to do the podcast. But I would say you could certainly do this with younger students, that you just need to have a real one-on-one opportunity for them to ask questions and learn the tool. So.
And I think we all would agree that most of our students teach us a lot about technology.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they come in armed with all these ideas and all these different applications if they have smartphones or access to Chromebooks or whatever it is. So they teach us as well. Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Yeah. Thank you, Dawn. Mm-hmm. Moving on, now we're going to talk a bit about creative writing and poetry, and Barb's going to talk about Douglas Florian, who is a poet, and how some of that could be integrated into math and science curriculum.
Great, thanks, Susie. This is Barb again, and I'm just such an advocate and a believer that poetry is one of the best arts to integrate because it connects writing with a vocabulary focus. There's just so much good that can come out of it, and the time on it can really have some amazing outcomes. So, and then before I share my specific example, wanted to alert you that we did include a list of great poetry applications shared from Edutopia in the webinar resources today. That really just is excellent listing of ideas and just places to plug in and how to really engage with poetry, no matter what your content area. But yes, so Douglas Florian is a poet who I discovered many, many years ago, and he's quite prolific. He's written many collections of poetry. I would call him a content poet because he's always writing about some, you know, either aspect of nature or animal life or the universe, and he brings in content into his then subjective focus, and it's really a beautiful blend of vocabulary with, you know, science or whatever. I guess it would be more science. I connect with my science colleague to work with these as an example for our students. And for example, he did a great book on the universe. And here's one he wrote on the sun and the moon. And when my students did a unit on the moon and the lunar cycles, they were able to write poetry that really showed some learning. They were required to incorporate 2 facts and then, you know, filter in the other figurative language pieces. That was really pretty amazing and really could be used in some sort of as an assessment tool in ways too. So highly engaging. If you don't know Douglas Florian, you should check him out because he really is an inspiration. And that was 6th grade, so I'm telling you, you know, he's really kind of relatable at probably many levels. But then just finishing, John Skazka, I always struggle with his name, so Skazka and Snet, these are very famous poetry books, I guess you'd call them poetry, Math Curse and Science Verse. And again, back to content, where they're writing about some specific math concept or topic, and then in a very creative way, very often in several poetry selections that they've written, and use that as inspiration for students to, no matter what your math content or your science content is. And my colleague brought that in so well. There's a student I remember just vividly, her experience with that, who truly struggled with math for all her years, and it was just a really hard part of her day. She struggled in math, but she's a very proficient writer, but she was a gifted artist. And with this unit and this extension activity, she was able to write a poem that demonstrated understanding of fractions, and also then add her illustration that again demonstrated knowledge at really high levels. And it was just one of those kind of magical outcomes, and really drove home the point of arts integration and how important that is for the multiple intelligences and students who really have gifts and long to use them. And that's just probably my favorite example, but I'll always remember her for that inspiration.
Yeah, I think as teachers, we all have those good memories of the students that we connect with, or something like this that happens in an organic way and, you know, goes on to help everybody.
Great.
Thank you for sharing that. Also, did you mention that Florian is the artist?
I forgot to. Thanks for reminding me. Yeah, he's not only the poet, but he's the artist, and he does these really brilliant, I guess you would call them drawings or paintings. He does kind of a combination of, that's part of the.
But the book covers.
Yeah, the book covers and all throughout the book.
Good.
So he's pretty amazing.
Very talented man.
Yeah.
Okay, Dawn is going to talk a bit now about creative writing and how she has used Craigslist ads to help her students learn creative writing. It's a fun story.
Anybody who's ever been on Craigslist, there's a list in most major cities across the nation and then abroad as well. But there is a plethora of interesting ads out there for a variety of things that you've heard of and many that you haven't. There is, in fact, a section of Craigslist that's called the Best of Craigslist, and that is a collection of ads that people have read and found particularly good for some reason. Could be the subject matter, but oftentimes it is because the writing is so phenomenal. And a lot of people really try to engage the people that they want to with good writing on Craigslist. So if you've ever seen an ad, the two that are up on the slide right now, those are two of the more interesting ads. They add a little bit of humor, a little creativity, and that was a good hook for my kids. When I taught remedial junior English, I really wanted to find a way to engage my students that would be pertinent and authentic, but would still relate to our English content. And one way you can use the ads of Craigslist is to analyze them for grammar, but I was looking more for of a creative writing element of it, where grammar in my instruction always came towards the end, where you would do the creative part and really work through the elements there, and then you would do the polishing at the end. But Craigslist is also a place where there are a lot of inappropriate ads. So before I really get into this, I want to just say that maybe older folks, older kids, but I would also say that you should pre-screen and make sure you're getting the ads that are really on the humorous and creative side and maybe less on the vulgar side. So when we read different novels, I had my students sometimes review Craigslist ads that I would find, and then they would write an ad in that format as the voice of one of the main characters, often in search of things that they were seeking in the novel. So, for instance, in The Crucible, the quote-unquote witches were looking for attention. You know, they might put an ad out for attention, or they could seek materials with which to make spells or some sort of a goofy thing like that. Sometimes I wanted them to just practice different kinds of writing from different perspectives, and they could create an ad in a particular tone, humor, satire, even a dialect of a given time period. Some of them had even posted some of their ads, and you can do so, as one of my colleagues pointed out, as Molly pointed out the other day, you can do this anonymously, so it's not like there would be any feedback back to the student or anything like that, but it just is a cool way for them to, it's a low-risk way for them to share their writing with the world. And some of the stuff out there is really quite engaging and funny, so I would recommend that. Just a fun little way to mimic different pieces.
Very creative. Thank you, Dawn. Moving on to film, video, and photography and how to analyze a photograph. Dawn will speak about that as well.
There was oftentimes ways that I could set the scene of a particular novel or even discuss a particular concept. And I had different aspects of social justice in my classroom, in my instruction as well. The two photographs on the right-hand side are from an educational trip that I took to India. And I would project these photos onto the smart board and ask the students to write about what they saw without ever having any information previously about the subject matter. In the case of the woman reading on the right-hand side, I was able to begin a discussion on the importance of literacy and education of women, what it meant to be educated in any society. The woman you see there had started reading and was reading at a 4th grade level, but she had often talked about, when we asked her questions, she had talked about how her husband couldn't control her anymore, and she could now read the ledgers to keep up their finances and all of those pieces. And so really, not just about literacy, but really about it being a change in their society. So we were able to discuss things about poverty and status in our own society. You could use this for an anticipatory set for any content area. I often think about how fun it would be to have a magnified piece of whether it's a plant or some sort of a molecule, to kind of have a really cool magnified photo that you could have students write about ahead of time, and they might even find some ways to merge the content with that. So it just was really interesting to spur on student perceptions and inferences in this way.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add to that. I know when we were talking about this the other day, I talked about the gallery walk, and if you take a moment to Google gallery walk on online, you'll see lesson plans for a gallery walk as well. And the same concept, you can take small photographs and put them up around your classroom and have students work either individually or in small groups to move around the room and look at photographs, and you can use that to teach themes. So I started Of Mice and Men that way with just images from the Great Depression, but you could use that in history class or science class as well. So even if you don't have a projector in your classroom or you don't have time to create a PowerPoint, even if you have a handful of magazine images or actual photographs, it's okay to hang those up in your classroom, and it gets kids up and moving as well, which they enjoy, and then they can take notes in their notebook. You can create some questions and then discuss it later. So there's a lot of nice lesson plans on that, on the gallery walk.
So, and then think also the accessibility with the pads, the iPads and Chromebooks, the cameras that students have accessible. And I've seen some really great lessons where they're out there taking photographs and creating, you know, making a contrast photo for something that they see, and really learning, trying to connect ideas and themes. And that's just so available to us now. So there's so much to do with photography.
Yeah, and I see students bringing in pictures from their, from their that they have archived or whatever that they could put up, and then somebody else would create a different story. They would know the background of the picture, but obviously other students could write different stories, and that would be fun for students as well. Good. Barb is going to talk a little bit now about persuasive essays and how to use iMovies to create PSAs, public service announcements. Thank you, Barb.
Yes, as part of our 6th grade writing curriculum, we spent a lot of time on persuasive writing, and students worked hard to understand the important components of persuasive writing, and then to integrate the arts as an artistic wrap-up extension to this unit. My 6th graders then were asked to create iMovies as PSAs, or public service announcements. And the technology application is perfect for small group collaboration, creative expression of a big idea or a message to the world, some action, call to action based on a topic that they've researched and that they've written extensively about. Really was so inspiring to me. A very simple application, took maybe 20 minutes of pre-teaching some of the tool features, and then students just in their small groups were creating really pretty compelling PSAs based on some of their concerns and the issues that they had researched. So this is, again, just something, they have authentic audiences to share these movies with, and it's really important. This is where you can give students a voice to share their ideas and to use their voice in another creative way. And again, the collaboration of a small group, really you can't beat it. So I encourage you to try that out as part of a, an application for movies.
Good, thank you, Barb. Don's going to talk now a bit about body sculpture and how we can use dance, drama, and movement in the classroom.
I love the idea. Anytime you can get students up and moving and using their bodies to learn, it certainly cements concepts in their brains to help them learning by doing. So the objective with a body sculpture is to create a sculpture to show learning. This is the perfect thing for kinesthetic learners. One example that I've seen is to have students show bonding of molecules, so you can kind of see the GIF that's going on, or the GIF if you pronounce it that way. You can show movement of molecules in that way, and you're able to really have them, like for instance, you could have one hydrogen student linking arms with two oxygen students to represent H2O. You could also use body sculpture to help students retain math concepts also, which like geometry in a real three-dimensional way. And so it honestly does help them retain their learning. So I'm a big fan of any time you get them moving.
Great. Good. Thank you, Don. Lastly, we're going to talk a little bit about the fine arts, drawing, painting, sculpture, printmaking, and Molly is going to talk about Avid OnePagers, and she'll explain what Avid means to you too when she talks about it.
Yeah, thanks. I wanted to end this one today because if you haven't heard of an Avid OnePager before, it's just a great tool to have, and really anyone can use it. So if you're not familiar with Avid, it's used all across the country in many schools. It's a program the acronym is Advancement via Individual Determination, and it's really for students to help those sort of middle-of-the-road students become high achievers and hopefully go on to a college education as well. So in the high school where I taught, we're an AVID school, and we had an AVID coordinator who brought us strategies all the time. And the one-pager was one of the first strategies that she brought to us. And what was cool about it is everyone in the building found an immediate way to use it in the classroom without a lot of additional work. So I wanted to share it with you today because it's easy to do, it doesn't take a lot of materials, and the products that you end up with are often very cool, and students really enjoy it. So an AVID one-pager is kind of a visual representation of a concept that the students have just learned. So in my English class, I would use it to highlight important concepts. So we might have a one-pager on symbolism, and they would talk about the symbolism in a text, or metaphor, or the conflict in a text. But I also use it at the end of a difficult chapter. So if I wanted them to just, what is the main concept in this chapter? Let's do a one-pager on that. Or if it was a short story or a little bit longer text, they might do a series of one-pagers, or even a final one-pager. So there's lots of different ways that you can do that. There's a couple of examples on the screen what they look like. There's one there of the To Kill a Mockingbird. So again, you give the students some instructions on how to set up their one-pager. It has to include the title. It has to include 2 quotes from the text. It has to include a minimum of 3 images, etc. So you get to set the parameters. We have included some very general templates for you in our resources list as well. What's nice about that feature is that there are a couple of different ways to set it up. So there's one that's a little bit more text-based, and there's one that's a little bit more art-based. I always went for the art-based one, and then it's really just what you want them to look like. And you can help younger students tell them, in the upper left-hand corner, I want to see this, so that you as a teacher can make sense of what's on the page, especially for younger learners who might not be quite as organized or as familiar with graphic organizers. The one on, there's one there too for science. You can see the main concept is energy, and then they have different examples there. What I think is really cool about it is that it's a nice entryway or entry point for students as well. So you will have students in arts integration who say, I'm not an artist. You can't make me do this. I draw stick figures. And I was the worst artist of them all. And so I always told them, what you lack in talent, you make up for in color. So I always said, I want to see color on the page, and I want to see you use ink when you write. It's difficult to see pencil. Even if you want to sketch something in pencil, come back over it with colored pencil. And I think that that was helpful for students who maybe were a little bit intimidated by the process, for them to have that encouragement to use color. And I'm not going to lie, my seniors were just as excited as my 4th grade daughter when she got to do a one-pager for the first time in her school. So I don't think there are very many kids who aren't excited when you bring out the markers in your classroom and or whatever it is that you have. So it's a nice way to use it. And again, it's just one of those nice entry points if you're trying to figure out a way to fit something in a little bit more creative and still hit the concepts that you need to in your daily lessons. Great. Thank you.
And then, Molly, one point to reiterate, did you talk about using it as an assessment tool, like an actual?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. So that was one of the things that we had talked about. What's cool about the one-pager is there really is enough content there that this can be an assessment. So if you are asking students to show you what they know on a particular topic, for example, I had my students read Letter from Birmingham Jail, which is a really difficult, complex text. And then at the end, I had them pull out 2 important symbols and 2 quotes that were about that symbol. And then they had to explain that symbolism on the page, and they had to draw the images and tell me what the theme of the text was. They were getting at some really serious elements of the lesson overall, and that was one of the options that I gave them for their final assessment. So I think that's what's really cool, is anytime you can take an art project or an arts-based lesson and turn that not only into how you understand something, but then also how you show your understanding at the end of a unit. So it takes a little bit more work, and obviously you would want it to be in a combination of other assessments as well, but it's a really nice way for those kids, especially those that feel like artists at heart, to show what they know. So,
yeah, great. Love that. Well, let's consider here at the end, let's wrap up our conversation with a call to action. That is, what is one way that you can infuse art into your classroom tomorrow? What could you do to act on your new awareness about this arts integration? So I've got some steps here for you to take some pretty simple steps. First, start with one form of art, any form of art that you feel most comfortable with, something you most enjoy. And then invite your students to share in the creativity that it engages, and they will feed off your energy from that. Start with learning objectives. Start with that first, the target skills, and let students collaborate on how to demonstrate their learning through artistic expression. So if you begin with the objective or the target, and then kids will go backwards and say, this is how I want to, show it, this is how I want to express it and act on it, it's pretty powerful starting point. You should offer simple art options for action and expression. I mentioned that earlier, but try it out for just like one chapter or one unit, maybe one project. Don't start big. Just say, I'm going to infuse some art into this unit. That's really the best approach, because that you'll be able to get a sense of it, a feel of what that will do for your students and for you. And then finally, don't forget to collaborate with your colleagues. You should seek out other classroom teachers or specialist teachers in your building, and then teaching artists or residencies outside of the building. Collaboration and creativity helps you then, as a teacher, create a new instructional framework and a new philosophy, really, for your teaching as a whole. Arts integration is contagious and highly engaging education for teachers and students.
All right, thank you for wrapping that up. Thank you, Barb, for creating this presentation. We're going to take a few minutes now to answer some of the questions that have come in throughout the presentation this afternoon. And this one just came in just to piggyback off of what you just said about teaching artists. And the teacher's asking, it says, you mentioned teaching artists in your presentation. How do teachers connect with them? So maybe, Barb, since you were just speaking about that, would that be one that you could answer? One thing, too, I know that you can't see us, so just letting you know that our panel will raise their hand here at our webinar site, and when they want to answer the question, I'll call on them and they'll introduce themselves so you know who's speaking.
Right. So this is Barb again, too, and I'm glad to answer this question because I did work with teaching artists several times throughout my career and found it to be really most positive outcomes from doing that. But the way to engage is really teaching artists, let me back up a minute, are artists first, and then they have some specific training in teaching and classroom presentation and working with students at different levels. And there really are some great organizations and nonprofits, agencies out there who are really supporting the arts by providing training for artists and creating residencies. In order to connect with them, it's a simple Google search, is to really plug in teaching artists in your community or your area, and you'll see some pop up. I can't speak to the rural areas, but it's usually, sometimes libraries themselves will have resources that are set up, and they'll have them through their website. So really start with that Google search, but also in your district, consider connecting through a district person to check in, because very often one building will utilize a residency and promote that through their school, and if they've had good success, then that's totally logical and already approved to bring over to your school and infuse into your school curriculum. So that, and then finally, just to mention, don't forget to connect with your school PTO or PTA, because very often they provide, they love to fund for those special projects and residencies, and that was the common occurrence for my particular school district.
And maybe some of the parents in the PTO or the PTA are the teaching artists as well. You know, that's another resource.
Exactly.
Great. This question is coming from a PE teacher, and the teacher is asking, brain research really supports movement. What is a good resource for arts integration regarding dance and movement? Dawn is enthusiastically raising her hand.
Hi, this is Dawn. There are two resources that I have for you on this one. Education Closet has excellent online plans for all of the arts, but also including dance. And then I would recommend the Arts Edge from the Kennedy Center. They also have a lot of online lesson plans for all of the arts and grade levels. So it's a good repository for lesson plans for that.
Great. This question, the teacher is saying that they teach math and science, and they're asking what are some good resources for me to use for math and science. Dawn again?
Yes, I can take that one again. Hi. So again, a lot of good resources out there. The first is the textbook by Sousa and Pilecki. I hope I'm saying that right. From STEM to STEAM, Building Brain-Compatible Strategies to Integrate the Arts. So any textbook that you see out there that has the acronym STEAM would have arts integration resources for math, science, engineering, and technology. The NEA website has great lesson plans and resources for all subjects for arts integration. Kind of an outlier, but certainly valuable, Palm Beach County, Florida. They have a district website for arts integrated lesson, and that's organized by subject. And then also Edutopia is fantastic, as always. We really love their website, but this is also containing many lessons by subject matter and grade level.
Great, thank you, Dawn. And here's a question about the administration. So the teacher's asking, or the professional is asking, what if your principal doesn't approve of spending instructional time on the arts?
Yeah, I can take that one.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Molly. Yep, and you know, I think the first thing that you want to do, kind of like the video that Barb shared at the beginning, is to really arm yourself with some facts. So when you look at what arts integration does for achievement, engagement, both for students and for teachers, I think that that's a really convincing place to start. I think administrators are often just very busy. They want to know what you need. They want to make sure that the other pieces of the puzzle are also fitting in, that something isn't getting pushed out. So come with a plan. You know, if you can find at least a few colleagues to approach the administration with, especially if you feel like you're getting a little bit of pushback, if they start to see the markers come out too often in your classroom and they want to know why that's happening, I think if you can come with a group and say, this is what we're doing, here's why we're doing it, we don't need any additional materials from you. Or this year we're just going to do it in our classrooms, we're going to try a few things, here's what we're thinking long term, if we want to look at teaching artists, or we want to look at approaching the PTO with something, so that your administrator knows what their position is in the grand scheme of things too, and what's going to be on their plate. And then, the other thing that I think is important to remember is, unfortunately, I know that's the case here in a lot of metro districts, is the arts and music are being pushed aside due to budget cuts and just what is important and focus on testing. And so I think that there are probably more administrators who would like to see classroom teachers willing to do more with arts integration, because perhaps the full art class has been removed or has been removed for many students. So you might have a more willing participant than you realize, especially if you can sit down and have a good conversation about that. So.
And you can share this webinar.
Absolutely. It's a good place to start.
And the video at the beginning.
Yeah.
In that video that we saw at the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely.
Back up your plan.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Molly. A question from a teacher asking, how do we justify teaching and learning time on the arts when we are working with at-risk students who need more time to meet goals? Anybody?
I can take that one. This is Dawn. This is one of those areas where arts integration really shines. The research is most clear, demonstrating the increased achievement gains for at-risk student populations, especially at the secondary level. It's one of those things that it just seems like it's just an obvious fit. The arts support reading development, which also is at the core of achievement gaps, and there's lots of research to support that. And just the idea of engagement, it's considered a key factor in lower achievement, especially for at-risk students. And the arts impact achievement by increasing student and teacher engagement through creativity and collaboration. It's kind of a win-win for everybody.
Definitely, yeah. The engagement piece is important. Okay, and here's one kind of piggybacking on the at-risk students. Here's what somebody asking about special education students and how the arts can support those special education students, particularly when they have IEPs.
Right, I'll handle that question.
This is Barb.
Yeah, this is Barb. I often worked very closely with my special education colleagues and trying to fulfill IEP requirements and goals. And arts integration is a philosophy that blends absolutely beautifully with something called UDL, or Universal Design for Learning. And that's really scientifically valid, a framework that guides education that provides flexibility for ways that information is presented so that students can take in new learning and content in a variety of ways based on their abilities, their strengths, and then also reduces barriers in instruction. So it provides appropriate accommodation, supports, and then it challenges and maintains high achievement expectations for all students. So ESL students who are, really learning a language along with it, but also those students with an IEP and any kind of IEP for choice from UDL is really a big aspect of it, and that is you can choose to act and express your learning in a variety of ways. And for students with IEPs, they're empowered by that, because all of a sudden they're engaging with the content with their peers in really effective ways, and that is really amazing to watch. And it's a good framework to attach to arts integration. I think they just go hand in hand, and again, collaborating with the special ed instructor is the key.
So many acronyms in education, just in your sentences,
Yeah,
talking about UDL and IEPs. And just to make sure that our audience knows what IEPs are, why don't you go ahead and...
Individual education plan,
right.
And
Good, thank you. Just in the interest of time, we'll answer one more question. And this question, I think, is a great takeaway to kind of wrap it up, because they're asking, what are some easy ways teachers can infuse the arts right away in their classrooms without a huge commitment to curriculum and assessment planning time?
I can take that one.
Okay.
Molly. I think hopefully we've given you lots of ideas here, and I think Barb had some ideas that were good. Start with an art form that you're comfortable with, obviously, or that your students are comfortable with. Don't be afraid to, put it on your students for the first time, like my daughter's history teacher did, and just say, come back with something and let's start the discussion there. I think that's a nice way. Transition times are great. Dawn talked about playing music during transition times, but you can also, do a 60-second dance or all kinds of things during those transition times, just to remind students about creative movement and things like that. You can do doodling. I always offered that as an option. So when I had students taking notes on something, I'd say, write the definition and draw a picture, or just draw a picture if that helps you. So think about ways to bring that into it. The podcast also, if you can get students just record simple things to share, is another way. So those are some good ways.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for your participation. A special shout out to Barb Istis for creating our presentation today. And of course, special thanks to our panelists, Molly Keeble and Dawn Butler. I am Suzanne Leslie, and we would like to thank you at Learner's Edge. We'd also like to thank you for participating and joining us today for this webinar. As a reminder, we will be sending you an email when the presentation is available online. So all of this information is available to you, and you can share that with those administrators that might be hesitant. So thank you for your participation. And again, we will email this to you, and we hope you have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.